Hi, my name is Elena Rodriguez, and the woman who shared my blood, my childhood memories, and my last name smiled at me across the mahogany conference table and said, "The board has decided your services are no longer needed," before sliding a termination letter toward me like it was a dinner check. My own sister, Carmen, had orchestrated my firing from Rodriguez Maritime Solutions, the shipping empire our grandfather built with his bare hands in the port of Long Beach. But what Carmen didn't know was that I had been documenting every illegal deal, every bribed official, and every falsified safety report she'd been running through our company for the past 18 months. She thought she was erasing me from the family legacy, but by the time the emergency board meeting ended 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the CEO chair and watching security escort her out with a cardboard box. Her corner office was empty by noon. La Z here. Before we dive into how a woman who got fired became the boss of the person who fired her, I need to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now, and have you ever trusted someone so completely that you missed every single red flag they were waving right in front of your face? Drop a comment below because you're about to hear a story about family, betrayal, and the dangerous game of thinking blood means loyalty. Let's begin. The morning Carmen fired me started like any other Tuesday in our Santa Monica headquarters. I was early, as usual, reviewing the quarterly safety inspections for our Pacific fleet. Our company operated 43 cargo vessels, employing over 800 people, and maintaining a spotless safety record that our grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, had built over 5 decades. Carmen breezed in around 9:30, designer heels clicking against the marble floors, carrying that oversized Hermes bag she'd bought after our latest acquisition in the Philippines. She looked polished, confident, untouchable. "Board meeting at 10, she said, not looking up from her phone. "Conference room A." I glanced at my calendar. "Nothing scheduled." "What's the agenda?" "Restructuring," she replied, still typing. "Dad wants to streamline operations." Our father, Roberto Rodriguez, had been gradually stepping back from day-to-day operations since his heart attack 2 years earlier. Carmen had been appointed interim chief operating officer, while I served as head of compliance and safety. We were supposed to be a team, the next generation carrying forward the Rodriguez legacy. I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. The conference room felt different that morning. Too formal. Too cold. The usual family photos that lined the walls seemed to be watching me with disappointment. Carmen sat at the head of the table where our father usually presided, flanked by 3 board members I recognized but rarely interacted with. Harrison Webb, our corporate attorney, Margaret Chen, our chief financial officer, and David Kowalski, head of operations in our Seattle division. All of them avoided eye contact with me. "Elena," Carmen began, her voice taking on that corporate tone she'd perfected in business school. "We've been reviewing your performance metrics over the past year." I felt my stomach drop. Performance metrics? I had the highest compliance ratings in company history. Our safety record under my oversight was flawless. We hadn't had a single major incident in 36 months. Harrison Webb slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Inspection reports with my signature that I'd never signed. Safety violations attributed to my department that I'd never approved. Financial discrepancies in compliance budgets that made it look like I'd been skimming funds for personal use. "These irregularities have come to our attention," Margaret Chen said, her voice steady but uncomfortable. "The board has lost confidence in your ability to maintain the standards this company requires." I stared at the papers, my hands trembling slightly. Every document was expertly forged. My signature was perfect, but I knew I'd never signed these reports. The dates corresponded to days when I'd been out of the office for various reasons, a pattern that looked suspicious if you didn't know the context. "This is impossible," I said, looking directly at Carmen. "These aren't my reports. I've never seen these violations. Someone has forged my signature." Carmen's expression didn't change. She'd perfected the art of looking concerned while feeling nothing. "Elena, I understand this is difficult to accept. Addiction and financial pressure can make people do things they never thought they would." Addiction? Financial pressure? I felt like I was watching someone else's life implode. I didn't drink, Rarely took as much as an aspirin, and my financial situation was stable. But as I looked around the table, I realized the narrative had already been written. Carmen had spent months building this case against me, creating a paper trail that painted me as a corrupt, unreliable employee who posed a liability to the company. "I'm offering you a generous severance package," Carmen continued, sliding another document toward me. 6 months' salary, continuation of your health benefits, and a positive reference letter. All you need to do is sign this non-disclosure agreement and transition your responsibilities to the interim compliance officer. The severance agreement was thick, full of legal language that essentially silenced me forever. I couldn't discuss company operations, couldn't disparage the Rodriguez family name, couldn't seek employment with any competitors for 2 years. It was designed to erase me completely from the maritime industry. I looked at my sister, this woman who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms when we were children, who cried when I left for college, who stood beside me at our father's bedside during his heart attack. Her dark eyes held no recognition of our shared history, no acknowledgement of the trust I'd placed in her for 28 years. "I need time to review this with my own attorney," I said, gathering the documents. "You have until 5 o'clock today," Harrison Webb interjected. "The board wants this resolved quickly to maintain company stability." As I stood to leave, Carmen finally spoke directly to me. "Elena, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Take the deal, move on, find something else to do with your life." The dismissal in her voice was complete. I wasn't her sister anymore. I wasn't even a former colleague deserving of basic respect. I was simply an obstacle that needed to be removed efficiently and quietly. I walked out of that conference room knowing my life as I'd known it was over. But what I didn't know yet was that Carmen had made a critical error. She'd assumed I was the same trusting little sister, who'd always believed her stories, who'd never questioned her motives, who'd never thought to protect herself from family. She was wrong. I didn't go home that afternoon. Instead, I drove to the small coffee shop near the Long Beach harbor, where our grandfather used to take Carmen and me every Saturday morning when we were kids. The same weathered dock workers still gathered at the counter, their conversations mixing English and Spanish in the rhythm that had soundtracked my childhood. I ordered Miguel's usual, black coffee with 2 sugars and sat at the window table where he used to quiz us about the ships in the harbor. "See that one, Mijas?" he'd say, pointing to a massive container vessel. "That's not just steel and paint. That's jobs for families, food for tables, dreams crossing oceans." Our grandfather had started Rodriguez Maritime with one small cargo boat in 1967, running routes between Los Angeles and Mazatlan. By the time I was born, we owned a fleet that connected every major Pacific port from Vancouver to Valparaiso. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, possibly drinking my last coffee as a Rodriguez Maritime employee, staring at the empire my grandfather had built, and my sister was determined to claim entirely for herself. My phone buzzed constantly with text from Carmen. "Have you made your decision? The board is waiting. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be." I turned my phone face down and tried to think through the morning's events logically. The forged documents were too sophisticated for a spur-of-the-moment decision. Carmen had been planning this for months, maybe longer. But why? We'd always worked well together. Our divisions complemented each other perfectly, and our father had frequently praised our collaboration in front of the board. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd overheard 3 weeks earlier. I'd been working late, finishing quarterly compliance reports, when I heard voices from Carmen's office down the hall. The building was supposed to be empty except for security, but Carmen's light was on, and her door was slightly ajar. I recognized her voice immediately, but the other voice was male, unfamiliar, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "The old man won't live forever," the stranger had said. "And when he's gone, you'll need someone who understands how business really works in these waters." Carmen's response had been muffled, but I'd caught fragments. "Eliminate complications. Streamline the succession. Sister's always been too idealistic." At the time, I'd assumed she was discussing theoretical future scenarios with a consultant or advisor. Our father's health had been declining, and it made sense that Carmen would be exploring different leadership structures. I'd dismissed the conversation and focused on my work, trusting that whatever decisions needed to be made, we'd make them together as a family. Now, sitting in Miguel's coffee shop with a termination letter in my purse, that conversation took on a sinister meaning. Carmen hadn't been planning for our father's eventual retirement. She'd been planning to eliminate me from the company entirely. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from David Kowalski, the Seattle operations manager who'd been in the board meeting. "Elena, I'm sorry about this morning, can we talk?" "Not on the company phone." David had worked for our company for 15 years, starting as a dock supervisor and working his way up through merit and dedication. Our father respected him enormously, often saying that David understood the heart of the shipping business better than most people who'd been born into it. If anyone on that board had reservations about Carmen's accusations, it would be him. I called him from my personal phone. He answered on the first ring. "Elena, thank God." I couldn't say anything in the meeting, but something's not right about those documents. "What do you mean?" "I've been reviewing inspection schedules for the past 6 months, cross-referencing with the reports they showed us today. Half of those violations allegedly occurred on days when your signature appears on completely different documents in my files. Documents that were filed from your office computer while you were physically in Seattle with me, attending safety training seminars." My pulse quickened. "David, are you saying you can prove I wasn't even in the building when some of these reports were supposedly signed?" "I'm saying I have hotel receipts, training certificates, and witnesses that place you 800 miles away from Long Beach when 3 of those major violations allegedly occurred under your supervision." The pieces started falling into place. Carmen had access to my office computer, my login credentials, and my digital signature stamp. As interim COO, she had administrative privileges throughout the company's systems. She could have easily backdated documents, inserted false reports, and created a paper trail that implicated me in violations that never actually happened. "David, I need you to print everything you have, every document that proves where I was and when. Can you do that without accessing company servers?" "Already done. I printed everything this morning after the meeting. My gut told me something was wrong." "Where can we meet?" "There's a diner on Pacific Coast Highway, about 10 minutes from your location. Murphy's. I'll be in the back booth." I gathered my things and headed for the door, but stopped when I saw the framed photograph hanging near the register. It was a picture from our company's 40th anniversary celebration, taken just 2 years ago. Carmen and I stood on either side of our father, all of us smiling, wearing matching navy blazers with the Rodriguez Maritime logo. We looked like the perfect family business partnership, 3 generations united in purpose and vision. But looking at that photo now, I noticed something I'd missed before. Carmen's smile was bright and confident, but her eyes were focused slightly off-camera, towards something or someone beyond the frame. Even then, she'd been looking past our family toward her own ambitions. My phone rang as I reached my car. Carmen again. Elena, I've been generous with my timeline, but I need an answer now. Sign the papers, take the severance, and we can all move on." "I'm still reviewing the documents with legal counsel," I said, which wasn't entirely untrue. David's evidence would be crucial for any legal challenge. "Don't drag this out unnecessarily. The board has made its decision. Fighting it will only hurt the family name and make things worse for everyone." There was something in her tone, a slight edge of desperation beneath the corporate authority. Carmen was pushing for a quick resolution because she needed me gone before I could investigate further. The longer I remained connected to the company, even as a terminated employee, the more likely I was to uncover whatever scheme she was running. "I'll have an answer tomorrow morning," I said. "Elena, I'm trying to protect you here. Take the deal." The line went dead. As I drove toward Murphy's diner, I realized that Carmen had just made her second critical error. She'd revealed that she was operating under time pressure, which meant whatever she was planning had a deadline. And that deadline was approaching fast. Murphy's diner looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. All cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly jaundiced. David was already waiting in the back corner, a manila envelope spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. He'd ordered coffee but hadn't touched it, his weathered hands drumming nervously against the Formica tabletop. 15 years I've worked for your family," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. Never seen anything like what happened in that boardroom today. He pushed the envelope toward me. Inside were photocopies of training schedules, hotel confirmations, flight itineraries, and dozens of time-stamped documents bearing my digital signature. David had been meticulous, organizing everything chronologically with yellow sticky notes marking discrepancies. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a safety violation report dated March 15th. "According to Carmen's evidence, you signed off on a major fuel storage inspection that found multiple code violations at our Terminal Island facility. But here's your boarding pass from that same day, showing you flew to Seattle for the Pacific Maritime Safety Conference. Here's the hotel check-in receipt. Here's the conference attendance roster with your signature." I studied the documents, my anger building with each piece of evidence. The fuel storage violation was serious, the kind of infraction that could result in massive fines and regulatory scrutiny. Carmen had attributed it to my negligence, making it appear that I'd approved dangerous conditions and then tried to cover it up. "There's more," David continued, flipping to another section. "April 22nd, Carmen claims you signed off on a crew overtime report that violated maritime labor regulations. But you were in my office that entire day, participating in the joint safety audit with the Coast Guard inspectors. I have the official audit report with both our signatures, time-stamped photos from the inspection, and witness statements from 3 Coast Guard officers. Each forged document told the same story. Elena Rodriguez was a negligent, possibly corrupt compliance officer who cut corners, ignored regulations, and falsified reports. But David's evidence painted a different picture entirely. On every date when these alleged violations occurred, I had been somewhere else, doing exactly the kind of thorough, by-the-book work that had earned our company its stellar safety reputation. "David, how long has Carmen had access to my digital signature? Since she became interim COO 18 months ago. Your father gave her administrative access to all department systems as part of the transition planning." He paused, stirring his untouched coffee. "Elena, there's something else. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier." The tone in his voice made my stomach clench. "What?" 3 months ago, Carmen called me directly. Said she was conducting an internal audit of safety protocols and needed me to send her copies of all inspection reports from the past year. Every department, every facility, every vessel in the fleet. That's not unusual. COOs review safety data all the time. Except she specifically asked me not to mention it to you. Said she wanted to identify any gaps in communication between departments before involving you in the review process. David's expression was grim. "I thought it was strange, but she's family, she's your sister, she's the COO, I sent her everything." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Carmen hadn't just been planning to frame me for recent violations. She'd been studying our entire safety operation for months, looking for vulnerabilities, learning the system well enough to manipulate it convincingly. Did she ask for anything else? Login credentials for the Seattle Compliance Database. Said she needed to verify that our northern operations were following the same protocols as Long Beach. David's hands had stopped drumming. "Elena, I gave her access to everything. If she wanted to create false reports and backdate them, I basically handed her the keys." My phone buzzed with another text from Carmen. "Board meeting in 1 hour. Final decision time. 1 hour." She was accelerating her timeline, which meant something was forcing her hand. I looked across the table at David, this loyal employee, who was clearly wrestling with guilt over his unwitting role in Carmen's scheme. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. In all your interactions with Carmen over the past few months, did you ever get the sense that she was working with someone outside the company?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he looked up, his expression was troubled. "There was a man at the Christmas party. Never seen him before. Didn't seem to know anyone, except Carmen. She introduced him as a, quote, business consultant. But he spent the entire evening asking detailed questions about our Pacific routes, our cargo manifests, our relationships with customs officials in various ports." "What kind of questions?" "Specific ones, like how long cargo sits in our Tacoma facility before customs clearance. Which routes had the least regulatory oversight? Whether we ever expedited shipments for premium clients without full documentation reviews. David's voice dropped lower. Elena, those weren't the questions of a legitimate business consultant. Those were the questions of someone looking for weaknesses in our compliance systems. I thought about the overheard conversation in Carmen's office. The male voice with the slight accent, talking about eliminating complications and understanding how business really worked in these waters. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what Carmen might be planning. David, do you remember this man's name? Viktor something. Russian or Eastern European. Carmen seemed very comfortable with him, like they'd known each other for a while. Viktor Kozlov? David's eyes widened. Yeah, that sounds right. You know him? I knew the name because it had appeared in several FBI maritime security briefings over the past year. Viktor Kozlov was suspected of running cargo laundering operations through legitimate shipping companies, using their clean reputations to move questionable goods through Pacific ports. The FBI had been investigating his network, but hadn't been able to prove connections to any specific companies. Until now. Carmen wasn't just trying to steal the family business from me. She was preparing to use Rodriguez Maritime as a front for criminal operations. And she needed me gone, because my compliance oversight would make it impossible for her to operate under the radar. Litas. My phone rang. Carmen again. Elena, I'm in the conference room. The board is assembled. Where are you? I'm on my way, I said, catching David's eye. He nodded and began gathering his evidence back into the envelope. Don't keep us waiting. This has already gone on longer than necessary. As I hung up, I realized Carmen had just made her third critical error. She'd assumed that giving me a deadline would pressure me into accepting defeat. Instead, she'd given me exactly what I needed, a clear timeline for her desperation and proof that whatever she was planning couldn't wait. The real question was whether I could gather enough evidence to stop her before that final board meeting destroyed everything my grandfather had built. The conference room felt like a tribunal when I walked in 20 minutes later. Carmen sat at the head of the table in our father's chair, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against a leather portfolio that I knew contained my professional death sentence. The same 3 board members flanked her, but this time they'd been joined by 2 people I didn't recognize. A sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who introduced herself as Patricia Vance from External Legal Counsel, and a heavy-set man with cold eyes who remained nameless throughout the entire proceeding. Elena, thank you for joining us, Carmen said, her voice carrying that false warmth she'd perfected for difficult conversations. I trust you've had time to review the severance package thoroughly. I took the seat directly across from her, the same spot where I'd received my termination that morning. The symmetry felt intentional, like Carmen was staging this final act for maximum psychological impact. She wanted me to feel small, defeated, grateful for whatever crumbs she was offering. I've reviewed everything, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have some questions about the documentation you presented this morning. Patricia Vance leaned forward, her expression predatory. Ms. Rodriguez, I should advise you that questioning the board's findings at this point could be construed as an admission that you're considering legal action against the company. That would nullify the generous settlement offer currently on the table. The threat was thinly veiled but clear. Sign the papers or lose everything, including the severance money. Carmen's smile widened slightly, mistaking my silence for capitulation. Elena's always been thorough, she said to the room, as if I weren't sitting right there. It's one of her strengths, actually. But sometimes, thoroughness can become problematic in fast-moving business environments. Harrison Webb shuffled through his papers, clearly uncomfortable with the entire proceeding. Perhaps we should just finalize the documentation and move forward. The company has operations to maintain. Of course, Carmen agreed. Elena, I need your signature on 3 documents. The resignation letter, the non-disclosure agreement, and the settlement acceptance. Once those are executed, we can all put this unfortunate situation behind us. She slid the papers across the table with ceremonial precision. The resignation letter was brief and brutal. I, Elena Rodriguez, hereby tender my resignation from Rodriguez Maritime Solutions effective immediately, acknowledging that my performance has not met company standards and that my continued employment would not serve the best interests of the organization. The non-disclosure agreement was worse. 47 pages of legal language that essentially erased my right to ever speak about the company, its operations, or my termination. I couldn't discuss Rodriguez Maritime with potential employers. Couldn't mention my 15 years of experience in compliance and safety. Couldn't even tell people why I'd left the family business. But it was the settlement agreement that revealed the true scope of Carmen's plan. Buried in the financial terms was a clause requiring me to surrender all company-issued devices, access cards, and documentation within 24 hours. More importantly, it included a provision stating that I waived any future claims to inheritance or ownership stake in Rodriguez Maritime Solutions, effectively signing away my birthright in perpetuity. "This clause about inheritance waiver?" I said, pointing to the relevant section. "This wasn't in the draft I reviewed this morning." Patricia Vance's expression didn't change. "Standard language for family business separations. Ensures clean transitions and prevents future disputes." "But Elena's ownership stake was established in our father's will," I said, looking directly at Carmen. "These shares can't be waived through an employment termination." For the first time all day, Carmen's composure cracked slightly. A flush of color rose in her cheeks, and her drumming fingers stilled completely. "Our father's estate planning is being restructured," she said carefully. "Given recent performance issues, he's decided to simplify the succession plan." "Where is our father, Carmen? He wasn't at this morning's board meeting, and he's not here now. Doesn't he want to discuss my termination personally?" The heavyset man with the cold eyes spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight accent that made my blood freeze. "Mr. Rodriguez Sr. is recuperating from his recent medical episode. He's delegated these decisions to interim leadership." Medical episode? Our father had been recovering steadily from his heart attack. I'd spoken with him just 3 days ago, and he'd sounded strong, optimistic about returning to more active involvement in company operations. Now Carmen was claiming he'd had another medical crisis serious enough to prevent him from participating in major business decisions? "I'd like to speak with him directly," I said. "That's not possible right now," Carmen replied quickly. "His doctors have recommended complete rest and isolation from business stress." "Which doctors? Which hospital?" Patricia Vance interjected sharply. "Ms. Rodriguez, your family's medical information is not relevant to this employment termination. We need your signature on these documents now, or the settlement offer will be withdrawn." The pressure in the room was suffocating. 6 people were staring at me, waiting for my surrender, confident that I had no choice but to sign away everything I'd worked for and everything I stood to inherit. Carmen's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Eliminate me from the company operations, silence me with legal agreements, and remove my claim to the family business while our father was conveniently unavailable to object. But I thought about David's evidence, about the forged safety reports, about Viktor Kozlov asking suspicious questions at the Christmas party. I thought about my grandfather Miguel, who'd built this company with integrity and determination, who'd taught Carmen and me that the Rodriguez name meant something in the maritime industry. "I'm not signing these documents," I said, standing up from the table. The silence that followed was deafening. Carmen's face went completely white, then flushed red with what I recognized as pure rage barely contained beneath her professional mask. "Elena, you're making a serious mistake," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "This is your only option. If you walk out of here without signing, you'll get nothing. No severance, no references, no future in this industry. I'll make sure every maritime company on the West Coast knows you're a liability. And I'll make sure they know why you think that," I replied, gathering my purse and jacket. Patricia Vance leaned back in her chair, studying me with renewed interest. "Ms. Rodriguez, are you threatening to breach confidentiality agreements you haven't even signed yet?" "I'm threatening to tell the truth," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "All of it." As I headed toward the door, Carmen's voice stopped me cold. "Elena, if you fight this, you'll destroy everything our grandfather built. Is your pride really worth bringing down the entire family legacy?" I turned back to face her, this sister who'd shared my childhood, my dreams, my trust for 28 years. "No, Carmen, but stopping you from destroying it certainly is." The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through the marble corridors of Rodriguez Maritime Solutions. I'd just declared war on my own family, with no allies, no resources, and no clear plan for victory. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I sat in my car in the Rodriguez Maritime parking garage for 20 minutes after walking out of that conference room, my hands shaking too badly to start the engine. The weight of what I'd just done pressed down on me like the concrete ceiling above. I'd thrown away a guaranteed severance package, burned bridges with the entire board, and declared war on my sister without any concrete plan for fighting back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Parking garage, level B2, southwest corner, come alone." The message made my pulse spike. Carmen worked fast, and if she was willing to involve people like Viktor Kozlov in her business operations, she might be willing to use intimidation tactics to secure my silence. But curiosity won over caution. I needed allies, and mysterious text messages were better than no communication at all. Level B2 was dimly lit and mostly empty, just a few scattered cars belonging to late-shift security guards. I found the southwest corner and waited, keys ready in my hand like a makeshift weapon. A figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar, and I nearly laughed with relief when I recognized the weathered face of Marcus Rivera, our head of fleet maintenance. "Marcus? You sent that text?" "Couldn't risk company phones," he said, glancing around nervously. "Elena, I heard what happened in the board meeting today. Word travels fast in a place like this." Marcus had worked for Rodriguez Maritime longer than anyone except my father. He'd started as a teenage apprentice mechanic when my grandfather was still running day-to-day operations, working his way up through pure skill and dedication. If anyone understood the true culture of our company, it was Marcus. "What exactly did you hear?" "Carmen railroaded you out with fabricated safety violations. That she had lawyers there to make sure you couldn't fight back." His expression was grim. "Elena, I've been keeping my mouth shut for months, but what happened today? I can't stay quiet anymore." "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled out a battered notebook, the kind mechanics use to track maintenance schedules. 3 months ago, Carmen started asking me to delay certain repairs on our Pacific fleet. Nothing critical, she said, just minor issues that could wait until the next scheduled dry dock period. That's not unusual. Budget constraints happen. Except these weren't budget constraints. She was specific about which vessels and which repairs. Only ships running certain routes. Only mechanical issues that could create delays without causing safety emergencies. Marcus flipped through his notebook, pointing to entries marked with red ink. "Look at this pattern." I studied his handwritten logs. The delayed repairs were all on vessels that serviced our most lucrative Pacific routes: Los Angeles to Manila, Long Beach to Singapore, Tacoma to Hong Kong. Ships that carried high-value cargo for premium clients who paid extra for guaranteed delivery schedules. "Marcus, what happens when these ships experience mechanical delays in foreign ports?" "Standard protocol is to arrange emergency cargo transfers to maintain delivery schedules. We contract with local shipping companies to carry our cargo on their vessels." He paused, meeting my eyes. "But Elena, the companies Carmen's been contracting with, they're not our usual partners." My stomach dropped. "Who are they?" "Kozlov Maritime Services. Viktor Kozlov's operation out of Vladivostok." Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Elena, your sister has been intentionally creating mechanical failures so she can justify transferring our cargo to Kozlov's ships. Our clients think they're getting legitimate Rodriguez Maritime service, but their goods are actually being transported by a company that's under federal investigation." The scope of Carmen's betrayal was staggering. She wasn't just planning to use Rodriguez Maritime as a front for criminal operations. She was already doing it, using our reputation and client relationships to legitimize Viktor Kozlov's suspicious shipping network. "How many transfers have there been?" 14 over the past 3 months. High-value cargo, time-sensitive deliveries, clients who pay premium rates for guaranteed service. Marcus closed his notebook. "Elena, if the federal investigators connect these transfers to Rodriguez Maritime, it won't matter that we didn't know what was happening. Our company will be destroyed. Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "I tried. Remember those maintenance reports I sent to your office in April and May? The ones flagging unusual repair patterns?" I did remember. Marcus had sent several detailed reports about maintenance anomalies across the fleet. But when I tried to discuss them with Carmen, she'd dismissed them as routine operational issues. She'd insisted that Marcus was being overly cautious, that his concerns reflected outdated thinking about modern shipping efficiency. Carmen told me you were handling those issues directly with the maintenance department. She ordered me to stop sending reports to compliance. Said the new operational structure meant all maintenance concerns should go through her office first. Marcus's expression was bitter. I should have known something was wrong when she started making decisions about ship repairs. COOs don't usually involve themselves in mechanical details. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from Carmen. Offer withdrawn. Security will escort you from the building in 1 hour. Clean out your office quickly. 1 hour. She was moving fast, probably hoping to prevent me from accessing any additional evidence or communicating with other employees. But Carmen had made another critical error. She'd assumed that firing me would isolate me from company information and loyal employees. Instead, she'd just confirmed that Marcus's suspicions were accurate and given me a clear timeline for how desperate she was becoming. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Can you document every cargo transferred to Kozlov Maritime? Routes, dates, cargo descriptions, client names. Already done, he said, patting his jacket pocket. Been keeping copies of everything since this whole thing started feeling wrong. And Marcus? Don't let Carmen know we talked. As far as anyone knows, you haven't seen me since this morning's board meeting. What are you planning, Elena? I looked around the empty parking garage, thinking about Viktor Kozlov's cold eyes in the conference room, about my father's mysterious medical episode, about the forged safety reports designed to destroy my credibility. I'm planning to save our family's company, I said. Even if that means destroying my family to do it. The Long Beach Public Library felt like an odd place to plan a corporate investigation, but it was one of the few locations where I could access the internet without leaving a digital trail tied to my personal accounts. I'd driven there directly from my meeting with Marcus, choosing a computer terminal in the back corner where I could work without being observed. My first search was for Viktor Kozlov. What I found made my blood run cold. Kozlov Maritime Services had been flagged by multiple international maritime security agencies for suspicious cargo manifests and unexplained route changes. According to a leaked Interpol bulletin from 6 months ago, his ships had been intercepted, carrying everything from unregistered pharmaceuticals to illegally harvested rare earth minerals. But Viktor was clever about maintaining plausible deniability, using legitimate shipping companies as unwitting partners to provide cover for his operations. I printed everything I could find about Kozlov's business network, his known associates, and the federal investigations that had been quietly building cases against him. Then I moved on to researching my own company's recent financial records. Rodriguez Maritime's public filing showed something disturbing. Our quarterly revenue had increased by 12% over the past year, but our profit margins had barely grown. Someone was siphoning money from our operations, disguising it well enough to avoid triggering automatic auditing systems. I cross-referenced our cargo manifests with the dates Marcus had given me for mechanical delays and emergency transfers. The pattern was unmistakable. Every time one of our ships experienced a convenient breakdown, Rodriguez Maritime paid Kozlov's company substantial emergency service fees for cargo transfers. But here's what made it criminal. Our clients were also being charged premium rates for these same transfers, meaning Carmen and Viktor were essentially double billing for services that our clients never agreed to receive. The library's printer hummed steadily as I documented everything. Financial records, shipping manifests, federal investigation summaries, news articles about maritime cargo laundering. I was building a case file that would expose not just Carmen's betrayal, but the entire criminal network she'd entangled our family business with. My phone vibrated with a call from David Kowalski. Elena, I just got a very strange directive from Carmen. She wants me to transfer all Seattle compliance records to a new digital storage system managed by external consultants. External consultants? That's what she called them. But Elena, I've been in this business long enough to recognize a data destruction operation when I see one. She's planning to wipe the evidence of those forged safety reports. When does this transfer happen? Tomorrow morning. She says it's part of the operational streamlining that started with your departure. David's voice was carefully neutral, probably because he was calling from his office phone. David, can you delay that transfer, even for a few hours? I can try, but Carmen's been very clear that this is a priority directive. Any delays need to be approved by her personally. After hanging up, I realized Carmen was systematically eliminating evidence faster than I could gather it. The forged safety reports, the financial irregularities, the suspicious cargo transfers. Everything was being scrubbed clean to protect her and Viktor from future investigations. But she'd made one mistake. She was focusing on digital evidence and assuming that paper trails could be managed or destroyed. Carmen had never worked in the trenches of our business like I had. She didn't understand that maritime operations generate multiple copies of everything, stored in different locations by different people for different purposes. I called Marcus from the library's payphone. Marcus, I need you to gather hard copies of every maintenance log, every cargo manifest, every emergency transfer document from the past 6 months. Can you do that without accessing the main computer system? Elena, that's a lot of paperwork. And if Carmen finds out I'm copying company documents? She's planning to destroy the digital records tomorrow. If we don't preserve the evidence now, it'll be gone forever. There was a long pause. My nephew works the night shift in the document storage facility. I might be able to arrange some after-hours access. Be careful, Marcus, and make sure everything gets stored somewhere Carmen can't access. I've got a storage unit in San Pedro. I bought it years ago for my boat restoration projects. His voice dropped to a whisper. Elena, there's something else. I overheard Carmen on the phone this afternoon, talking to someone about accelerating the timeline. She said something about finalizing the succession paperwork before the end of the week. Succession paperwork? Sounded like legal documents. She mentioned your father's signature and something about emergency provisions in the company charter. My heart stopped. Emergency provisions in our company charter allowed for immediate ownership transfers if the current CEO was declared medically incapacitated by a licensed physician. If Carmen had somehow convinced a doctor to sign off on our father's supposed medical crisis, she could legally assume control of Rodriguez Maritime without board approval or family consent. Marcus, I need to see my father. Tonight. Elena, Carmen said he's in intensive care. No visitors allowed except immediate family. I am immediate family. She specifically mentioned that you're not to be told which hospital he's in. Said it would be too emotionally traumatic, given your recent employment issues. Carmen had isolated our father completely, probably convinced him that I was having some kind of breakdown that required protection from family stress. If he was sedated or medically compromised, he might have signed documents without fully understanding their implications. I gathered my printed evidence and headed for the exit, my mind racing through possibilities. Carmen had legal control, financial backing from criminal partners, and board support. She'd eliminated my access to company resources and was systematically destroying evidence of her crimes. But she'd forgotten something crucial about our family business. Rodriguez Maritime wasn't just about profit margins and operational efficiency. It was built on relationships, trust, and the kind of loyalty that couldn't be manufactured or purchased. And some of those relationships went back 50 years, longer than Carmen had been alive. I drove toward San Pedro, where my grandfather's oldest friends still gathered every evening at Rosie's Cantina to share stories about the early days of Rodriguez Maritime. If anyone knew how to fight Carmen's takeover, it would be the men who'd helped Miguel Rodriguez build this company from nothing. Rosie's Cantina hadn't changed since my childhood visits with my grandfather. The same faded photographs of cargo ships lined the walls, the same weathered fishermen occupied the corner booths, and the same smell of salt air and diesel fuel drifted through the screen door. I found exactly who I was looking for at the far end of the bar. 3 men in their 70s nursing beers and arguing about baseball in rapid-fire Spanish. "Mija," called out Roberto Sandoval, Miguel's former business partner who'd sold his shares back to our family in 1985. "Elena Rodriguez, come here, let me look at you." Roberto had been my grandfather's closest friend and confidant during the early expansion years. If anyone understood the real structure of Rodriguez Maritime's ownership and governance, it was him. The other 2 men, Carlos Mendez and Tony Delgado, had served as informal advisors to my grandfather for decades, helping navigate union negotiations and regulatory challenges. Roberto, I need your help. It's about the company. His expression immediately sobered. Sit down, Misha. Carlos, get her a beer. Tell us what's happening. I explained everything in rapid Spanish, the language of my childhood and my grandfather's business dealings. The forged safety reports, Viktor Kozlov's involvement, Carmen's systematic takeover, our father's mysterious medical crisis. The three men listened without interruption, their weathered faces growing grimmer with each revelation. That pendeja thinks she can steal what Miguel built, Roberto said finally, using language that would have scandalized my business school classmates but felt perfectly appropriate for the situation. Roberto, do you remember the original partnership agreements? The ones from when you and my grandfather started the company? Of course, I helped draft them. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card so old and faded I could barely read it. My lawyer, Benjamin Torres. He's retired now, but he keeps copies of every document he ever filed. Your grandfather was paranoid about paperwork, God rest his soul. Carlos leaned forward. Elena, there's something your sister doesn't know about those original agreements. Miguel insisted on protection clauses, ways to prevent hostile takeovers even by family members. What kind of protection clauses? Emergency board provisions, Tony explained. If three original partners or their designated representatives call for an emergency review of company leadership, it triggers an independent audit of all recent corporate decisions. Roberto nodded enthusiastically. Miguel was worried about future generations making stupid decisions that would destroy the company. He built in safeguards. But you sold your shares decades ago. I sold my ownership shares, Mija, but the partnership agreement granted me and these two cabrones lifetime advisory positions with emergency review authority. We never exercised those rights because we trusted your father and respected the family succession. Roberto's eyes hardened. But what Carmen is doing, this is exactly what those clauses were designed to prevent. I felt hope for the first time in days. Can you trigger this emergency review? Already making calls, Carlos said, holding up his cell phone. Benjamin Torres is driving down from Pasadena tonight. If we can get the paperwork filed by tomorrow morning, it freezes all major corporate decisions pending the audit, including succession paperwork? Especially succession paperwork, Tony confirmed. Miguel was very specific about protecting against family coups. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your father is at Mercy General, room 314. Come alone. Delete this message. Someone inside Carmen's circle was helping me, but I couldn't determine who or why. It could be a trap, but it could also be my only chance to reach our father before Carmen's legal maneuvering became irreversible. Roberto, can you handle the emergency board filing without me? Leave it to us, Micha. Go find your father. As I headed for my car, Roberto called out one last piece of advice that chilled me to the bone. Elena, if your sister is working with people like Viktor Kozlov, she won't stop at legal battles. Be very careful who you trust. Mercy General Hospital felt like a fortress at 10:30 at night. All fluorescent corridors and antiseptic silence, broken only by the distant hum of medical equipment. I'd parked 3 blocks away and entered through the emergency department, avoiding the main lobby where Carmen might have posted security or allies to prevent my visit. Room 314 was in the cardiac wing, which made sense given our father's heart condition. But when I peered through the small window in the door, what I saw made my blood freeze. My father was awake, sitting upright in bed, looking healthier than I'd seen him in months. He was reading a newspaper and drinking what appeared to be regular coffee, not the restricted diet of a man in a medical crisis. I slipped inside quietly. Papa? Roberto Rodriguez looked up with surprise that quickly transformed into relief. Elena, Mija, what are you doing here? Carmen said you were having problems, that the doctors recommended you stay away from family stress. What doctors? Papa, what exactly did Carmen tell you? My father set down his newspaper, confusion clouding his features. She said you'd been struggling with depression and anxiety since your accident last year. That you'd been making mistakes at work, that the board was concerned about your judgment. What accident? The fall you took at the marina. Carmen said you hit your head, that you'd been having memory issues and mood swings since then. His voice carried genuine concern. She showed me medical reports, Mija. Brain scans showing possible trauma. I sat heavily in the bedside chair, the scope of Carmen's deception becoming clear. She'd fabricated an entire medical history for me, complete with forged brain scans and psychological evaluations, to convince our father that I was mentally unstable and unfit for business responsibilities. Papa, I never fell at the marina. I've never had a head injury. Those medical reports were fake. But the brain scans can be digitally altered, just like the safety violation reports she forged to get me fired today. I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of David's evidence. Papa, Carmen terminated my employment this morning using fabricated documents. She's been working with criminals to use our company for money laundering. My father's face went pale as I explained Viktor Kozlov's involvement. The suspicious cargo transfers, the systematic destruction of evidence. With each revelation, I watched him transform from a concerned parent protecting his troubled daughter to a furious businessman, realizing he'd been manipulated by his own child. Where are the succession documents she had you sign? In the safe at home. But Elena, those were just precautionary papers in case my health deteriorated further. He paused. She said you'd agreed to step back from company responsibilities to focus on your recovery. I never agreed to anything. Papa, she's planning to assume complete control of Rodriguez Maritime and use it as a front for Viktor Kozlov's criminal operations. A soft knock on the door interrupted us. A nurse entered, but something about her demeanor seemed wrong. She moved too purposefully, her eyes scanning the room rather than focusing on my father's medical needs. Visiting hours ended 2 hours ago, she said, looking directly at me. Family members need to respect patient recovery protocols. I'll be leaving soon, I replied, but my instincts were screaming warnings. This woman wasn't checking on my father's medical condition, she was monitoring who had access to him. After she left, my father grabbed my hand. Elena, if what you're telling me is true, Carmen has been planning this for months. The medical reports, the succession papers, even my stay here at the hospital. What do you mean about the hospital stay? Carmen insisted I needed comprehensive cardiac testing after some chest pains last week. But the doctors finished their tests 2 days ago. She keeps finding reasons why I need to stay longer. His grip tightened. Mija, I think she's been keeping me isolated here while she finalizes her takeover. The pieces fell into place. Carmen hadn't been protecting our father from stress. She'd been warehousing him in the hospital to prevent him from interfering with her plans or discovering the truth about her criminal partnerships. Papa, we need to get you out of here, tonight. The doctors said. The doctors cleared you 2 days ago. You're being held here against your medical needs. I helped him start gathering his belongings. Roberto, Carlos, and Tony are filing emergency board papers tomorrow morning to freeze all corporate decisions. But if Carmen realizes you're no longer under her control... My father's expression hardened with the same determination I'd seen him use in difficult business negotiations. Then we'd better make sure she doesn't find out until it's too late to stop us. We left Mercy General through the service elevator, my father wearing scrubs I'd borrowed from an unattended laundry cart and a surgical mask that concealed his identity from security cameras. The hospital's night shift was minimal, and we encountered only one custodian who barely glanced up from mopping the corridor floors. By midnight, we were in my car heading toward the emergency board meeting that Roberto had arranged for 6 a.m. at Benjamin Torres's law office. Mija, there's something else Carmen doesn't know, my father said as we drove through the empty streets of Long Beach. Your grandfather left instructions for exactly this scenario. What kind of instructions? Hidden documentation. Miguel was paranoid about future generations betraying the company values, so he created what he called insurance policies. Roberto Rodriguez's voice carried a mixture of pride and sadness. After Carmen became interim COO, I started noticing changes in her behavior. The way she talked about efficiency over ethics, profit over principle. So I activated one of your grandfather's safeguards. Papa, what are you talking about? For the past 6 months, I've been wearing a digital recording device. Everything. Every conversation with Carmen, every board meeting, every discussion about company strategy. He pulled a tiny device from his shirt pocket, no bigger than a button. Elena, I have recordings of Carmen discussing Viktor Kozlov's operations, planning your termination, even laughing about the forged medical reports. I nearly swerved off the road. You recorded everything? Your grandfather taught me that trust is earned daily but can be lost in an instant. When Carmen started making decisions that felt wrong, I decided to document everything until I could determine whether my suspicions were justified. We arrived at Benjamin Torres's office building just as Roberto's van pulled into the adjacent parking space. The elderly lawyer had clearly been roused from sleep, his white hair disheveled and his shirt buttoned incorrectly, but his eyes were sharp with professional focus. Roberto Rodriguez, Benjamin said, embracing my father warmly. Miguel would be proud to see you fighting for his company. Benjamin, do you still have the original partnership documents? Every page, every clause, every amendment Miguel ever insisted on, including. Torres unlocked his office door. That man was obsessed with protecting Rodriguez Maritime from internal threats. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of legal documentation, digital evidence review, and strategic planning. Benjamin Torres proved that Miguel's original partnership agreements included provisions for emergency leadership reviews triggered by 3 lifetime advisory board members. Roberto Sandoval, Carlos Mendez, and Tony Delgado still held those positions, despite decades of dormancy. My father's recordings were damning. Carmen's voice, clear and confident, discussing cargo manifests that would never pass federal inspection. Viktor Kozlov explains how legitimate shipping companies could be used to launder money through emergency transfer fees. Carmen laughing about my supposed mental health crisis while planning to commit me to extended psychological treatment. This is enough to remove Carmen from all corporate positions and potentially trigger federal criminal charges, Benjamin said, organizing documents into legal folders. But Elena, we need to execute this perfectly. If Carmen suspects what's happening, she could destroy evidence or flee the country. What's the timeline? The emergency board meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. Under Miguel's original charter, all major corporate officers must be notified 6 hours before any emergency review. Torres checked his watch. We'll send notifications at 3 a.m. Carmen will have just enough time to arrive at the meeting, but not enough time to mount a defense or destroy additional evidence. Roberto looked up from his phone. Marcus just texted. He's secured all the maintenance logs and cargo manifests. Everything's stored safely off-site. And David? He managed to delay the digital storage transfer by claiming system compatibility issues. All the forged safety reports are still accessible in the Seattle servers. As dawn approached, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine hope. Carmen had built her betrayal on the assumption that she was smarter than everyone around her, that her business school education and corporate connections made her superior to the people who'd actually built Rodriguez Maritime. But she'd underestimated the loyalty that real partnerships create, the bonds forged over decades of shared struggle and mutual respect. Miguel Rodriguez hadn't just built a shipping company. He'd created a family of people who would fight to protect his legacy from anyone who tried to corrupt it, even if that someone shared his blood. At 8:45 a.m., Benjamin Torres called Carmen's office. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Benjamin Torres representing the Emergency Advisory Board of Rodriguez Maritime Solutions. You are required to attend an emergency leadership review meeting beginning at 9 a.m. The address is... The hunt was over. Now comes the reckoning. Carmen arrived at Benjamin Torres's office at exactly 9 a.m., her confidence radiating through the reception area like armor. She wore her most expensive suit, carried her leather briefcase like a weapon, and walked with the purposeful stride of someone who believed she controlled every variable in the room. She brought Patricia Vance, her external legal counsel, and 2 men I didn't recognize but whose presence felt threatening in a way that had nothing to do with law. This is highly irregular, Patricia announced before anyone could speak. Miss Carmen Rodriguez was not given adequate notice for this meeting, and the Emergency Advisory Board hasn't convened in over 30 years. Benjamin Torres smiled with the calm satisfaction of a man who'd spent 5 decades outmaneuvering corporate lawyers. The emergency provisions were specifically designed to be triggered without extended notice periods. Please take your seats. Carmen's eyes found mine across the conference table, and for a moment, her mask slipped completely. She'd expected to spend this morning destroying the last of the evidence against her, not defending herself against charges she thought no one could prove. Elena, what is this nonsense? You were terminated yesterday for legitimate performance issues. You have no standing to participate in company governance. Actually, my father said, rising from his chair, she has every right to be here. Carmen's face went white. Papa? But you're supposed to be in the hospital. The doctors said. The doctors cleared me 2 days ago. I've been staying voluntarily while gathering evidence of your criminal activities. Roberto Rodriguez's voice carried the authority that had built Rodriguez Maritime into a Pacific powerhouse. Carmen, you're hereby removed from all positions within Rodriguez Maritime Solutions, effective immediately. You can't do that. I have legal authority under the succession documents you signed. Benjamin Torres opened a thick legal folder. Those documents were signed under fraudulent pretenses. Using fabricated medical information, they're legally void. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a carefully choreographed performance. Roberto Sandoval presented Marcos Rivera's maintenance logs, showing deliberate sabotage of company vessels. Carlos Mendez played excerpts from my father's secret recordings, Carmen's voice filling the room with casual discussions of federal crimes. Tony Delgado handed Patricia Vance a federal warrant that had been issued that morning, authorizing the seizure of all Rodriguez Maritime financial records related to Kozlov Maritime Services. Carmen listened to her own voice incriminating herself, watched decades of evidence pile up against her, and slowly realized that every move she'd made had been documented by people she'd underestimated. Elena, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, you're destroying our family. No, Carmen, I'm saving it. The federal agents arrived at 10:15, led by a woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Sarah Chen from the Maritime Criminal Investigative Service. They arrested Carmen on charges of maritime fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes. Patricia Vance was detained for questioning regarding her role in the document forgeries, Charman's. As they led Carmen away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one final time. This isn't over, Elena. Yes, it is. That afternoon, the Rodriguez Maritime Board of Directors unanimously voted to name me Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. My first official act was promoting Marcos Rivera to Chief Operations Officer and David Kowalski to Head of Corporate Compliance. My second was implementing new transparency protocols that would make it impossible for any future executive to operate secret partnerships or manipulate company records. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Carmen had fired me, looking out at the Long Beach harbor where my grandfather had started, with one small cargo boat and a dream. Rodriguez Maritime Solutions was stronger than ever, our safety record was impeccable, and our reputation in the Pacific shipping industry had been restored. Carmen was serving 18 months in federal prison, and Viktor Kozlov had been extradited to face charges in 3 countries. Our family business was exactly what Miguel Rodriguez had always intended it to be, a legitimate operation built on integrity, loyalty, and respect. And sometimes, late at night when I was working in the CEO office that had once been my father's, I thought about trust and betrayal, about the difference between family and blood, about the choice between easy corruption and difficult righteousness. My sister had chosen wrong, but Rodriguez Maritime Solutions would survive, because some legacies are stronger than the people who try to destroy them. The real twist came 3 months after Carmen's sentencing. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked on my office door, her expression uncertain. Elena, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your cousin. I looked up, confused. We don't have any cousins. She says her name is Isabella Rodriguez Chen. She's from the Philippines division. My blood went cold. Rodriguez Maritime had never operated a Philippines division. But as the woman entered my office, I saw the unmistakable family resemblance in her dark eyes and determined jawline. Elena, my name is Isabella. My grandfather was Miguel's younger brother, Eduardo, the one who stayed in Manila when Miguel came to America. She placed a worn photograph on my desk. 2 young men standing beside a small fishing boat, their arms around each other's shoulders. I recognized my grandfather immediately, but the other man's face was entirely unfamiliar. Carmen wasn't working alone, Isabella continued. Our family in the Philippines has been watching Rodriguez Maritime for decades. waiting for the right moment to claim what they believe is their inheritance. Carmen made contact with them 2 years ago. I stared at the photograph, realizing that Carmen's betrayal had been part of a much larger conspiracy spanning 2 countries and 50 years of family secrets. Elena, they're coming. And they're bringing legal documents that predate your grandfather's American business registration. The fight for Rodriguez Maritime wasn't over. It was just beginning. If you enjoyed this story of family betrayal, corporate intrigue, and the fight to protect a legacy, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We post news stories every week about people who refuse to let others destroy what they'd built. Drop a comment below telling us about a time someone underestimated you, and maybe your story will be featured next. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's proving them wrong. Thanks for watching. And remember, your family name is only as strong as the principles you're willing to fight for.